When, therefore, the appointed time had come, the Romans drew up their forces for battle. Catullus had 20,300 soldiers, while those of Marius amounted to 32,000, which were divided between both wings, and had Catullus between them in the centre, as Sulla, who fought in this battle, had stated. As for the Cimbri, their foot soldiers advanced slowly from their defences, with a depth equal to their front, for each side of their formation had an extent of 30 furlongs. And their horsemen, 15,000 strong, rode out in splendid style, with helmets made to resemble the maws of frightful wild beasts or the heads of strange animals, which, with their towering crests of feathers, made their wearers appear taller than they really were. They were also equipped with breastplates of iron and carried gleaming white shields. For hurling, each man had 2 lances, and at close quarters they used large, heavy swords. And so Plutarch describes a lead-up to the Battle of Vercaelle, the final battle of the 12-year Cimbrian War, where the tribes of the Cimbrians and the Teutones with their allies came dangerously close to crushing Rome, by Roman accounts. So it was a very deadly war, dangerous war for Rome. In Roman sources, it's they say, Roman historians, that it was just as grave a moment as when Hannibal invaded. Now this is a largely forgotten war, but I'm quite excited today because I'm out in one of the few places that historians have managed, or many historians connect to the tribe of the Cimbrians. I'm at Borremose in Himmerland in Denmark. This is a fortified fort with a moat, earthworks around, and several dozens of tufts from houses. It's not a place you hear of that often, and it's also a largely forgotten war. If you ask most people, maybe except this local area, but in Denmark, they won't have heard of the Cimbrian War at all. And judging by Plutarch's description, the battles the Cimbrians engaged in make the Viking Age look like peanuts. So I thought I'd use some time here today to talk a little bit about these forgotten warlords. People who have maybe followed me a bit know that my kind of rule of thumb is, until proven otherwise, I try to trust old sources, because I feel that so many times distrust has been heaped upon old sources, and it has turned out that they were true, no matter what our modern notions have cooked up. So I tend to trust old sources, of course not when it's manifestly wrong, but for quite a stretch. So of course there's some controversy to who the Cimbrians were, the nature of their campaign, and so forth, and I'll address these going along. But I just want to place my own bias out there, that I probably put more trust in our forefathers than the normal historic approach. So the Cimbrian campaign, it's generally said to be from 113 BC until 101 BC. And according to most scholars, they agree that the Cimbrians and the Teutones, they were tribes out of Jutland. while the Ambrones are many times placed in the area around Himmerland, which would be North Saxony, towards the coast. And then the Tigurini, which also joined forces with them later, were tribes connected to modern-day Switzerland. There's some discussion to the Cimbrians' location. I was just recently reading a paper by a Danish historian and one of the main people at one of the museums here in northern Denmark, where he criticized the connection between the Cimbrians and Himmerland. And he is a little strange article, because the example he uses to shoot it down is an Iron Age village outside Aalborg. It's not even the village that is archaeologists usually connect to the Cimbrians, so a little bit strange that he doesn't at all mention Borremose or all the finds in this area, which quite clearly connect to the Cimbrians in that time frame. And he says that Strabo places the Cimbrians on the Elbe, because that's how far the Romans went. Almost all the other, and even Strabo himself, if you just read a little bit further in him, places the Cimbrians on a peninsula north of the other Germanic tribes, and to the east of that peninsula is a strait with many islands, a large strait with many islands. So it's pretty clear that he's talking about Denmark. And Strabo only mentions that the Roman forces generally have gone up until the Elbe, and then along the Elbe you, with another tribe, find the Cimbri, which isn't so strange, because the peninsula of Jutland was called the Cimbrian Peninsula. And north of Elbe you come into Schleswig-Holstein and this area, which in the earlier Danish times was just as much Danish territories as it was German territories. So connecting that historically the Jutish tribes have always had loads of contact and marriages and alliances with the Northern Saxon and the Frisian royal lineages. So I can't see how that is an argument against the Cimbri emigrating out of Jutland. So both from the Roman sources, it's quite clear that their homeland was Jutland. And here in Jutland we have Himmerland, where I'm now, which etymologically some connect to the Cimbri. And the reason why they do that isn't only because the word is similar, it's also because it's in this area where you have all these magnificent finds. The Gundestrup Cauldron was found just way northwest of here, and you have the Ertebølle culture, which is older, which is also just northwest of here. You have several, so many burial mounds. It's just really nice to drive through this area, because almost anywhere you look you see marks in the landscape from history. A very, very rich cultural history. And then of course you have this Borremose fort. And this fort hits directly down in the Cimbrian emigration. It's a fortified fort. And exactly at the time of the Cimbrian exodus, This whole fort is burnt down, but not with signs of violence. Not explicit. I mean, of course, there could have been an attack, but it seems that it's burnt down and covered up on purpose. And after that, there's no activity here. And in this time frame, you also have a strong climatic shift in Denmark, where it gets much colder. And the finds from this time of where you found bodies in what they call the moose here, like wetlands here, they show strong signs of starvation. Like they have their growth stops for a while in the bone structure and then starts. It's a strong sign of starvation. So quite clearly they ran into some really, really bad times here. Also, this is a moose, Borremose. It's in a wetland. It could have been that there was an inland lake. If you go further north from here, there still are vestiges of an inland lake. So if it got colder and wetter, for example, a prolonged rainfall, this area would be inundated. It would be horrible to live in. And many of the areas around here would be hard to live in if suddenly the agricultural conditions changed, so what you could grow changed. For example, cattle and such in the Bronze Age period here, they were out all throughout the whole year, throughout the whole day. But you see a shift that in the running into the Celtic Iron Age, which is this, you get a shift in there where suddenly those the farms, they have to have their cattle indoors on stables during winter. So there's a dramatic shift there in how land is used. Also, the agricultural findings here from this area, the earth seems to have been worked very, very hard. So quite likely there was an issue with overpopulation as well. So the indicators here at Borremose, to my mind, seem, and the time frame, just make a lot of sense. That this would have been one of the places where that was abandoned and left. So the Cimbrian campaign, according to Roman sources, it starts, they move out of their homelands and south and east. I would think they were moving along either the Oder or the Vistula, most likely the Oder. And these were old trade routes for amber and other things, but a lot of amber trade going along those roads. And yeah, I think just moving along the rivers would make sense. You have water close by. If you have a lot of supplies, you can easily transport them, pull them along with barges and have boats. And these would also be, as their homelands were along the Limfjord, they would also be seafaring. So, which also explains probably why they went south and east, because then they would have gone out of the Limfjord on the east side, and followed Jutland south on that way, and followed the Baltic coast until they came to the big rivers. Anyway, they move down, have some skirmishes and battles, and end up allying themselves with a couple of tribes, and so they expand their numbers and then push in to the first engagement with the Romans. So in 113 BC, the Cimbrian army pushes into Noricum on the Danube, This is a Roman province, and there's a tribe that was called the Taurisci, which is lives in that province, and they see this massive host approaching, which now is Cimbrian and 2 or 3 other allied tribes, and they see that defense, they won't be able to withstand this army, so they call on help from Rome. And the Roman consul Gaius Papirius Carbo, he arrives with his legions to defend Noricum. And they hold battle with the Cimbrians at the Battle of Noreia. This is the first time the Romans engage with the Cimbrians in warfare. And the Cimbrians crush the Roman army completely, annihilate it, and almost kill Carbo in the process. And this is a great shock to Rome, because of course they hadn't expected this, and actually now the door to invade Rome is completely open for the Cimbrians. Now it seems as if the Cimbrians weren't aware that this defeat was so devastating for the Romans, because instead of going straight for the riches in through the Alps and down into Italy, they for some reason move west and into Gaul. So in 109 they engage with the Roman army in Gaul, Narbonensis, the Battle of Narbonensis, and again they crush the Roman army. And in 107 a Cimbrian ally, the Tigurini, which was the tribe from the Alpine regions, meet the Romans and crush them as well. So the Romans are being defeated time and time again in these years by the Cimbrians and their allies. And that same year of 107, the Cimbrians fight the Romans in a large battle again at the Battle of Burdigala, which is Bordeaux, and they crush the Roman army once more, and this time killing their commander. So Romans run into defeat after defeat over several years at the hands of the Cimbrians, and all this leads up to the most fateful day in that period for the Romans, which is the Battle of Arausio. Now, for the Battle of Arausio, the Romans had fielded an enormous army. So they wanted to crush the Cimbrians. And on the Roman side, there were 80,000 Roman soldiers, and in addition 40,000 auxiliary forces, so 120,000 men in all, with about 60,000 logistical personnel. But the 2 consuls that led the army hated each other. The consul Caepio and Maximus, they hated each other, so they sat down by the river Rhone and camped separately on either side of the river, thereby making themselves vulnerable for attack, in separate attack. Anyway, Caepio, he was really overconfident and thought he could crush the Cimbrians alone. So Caepio, he decides to attack and steal the glory for himself foolishly. He thinks he could defeat these barbarian hordes and take all the glory. This proves disastrous, as the Cimbrians, they crush his army, killing almost everyone, and then easily run through the camp of Maximus's army, and which haven't had time to organize, and crush them as well. And during the fleeing afterwards, many thousands are murdered or killed by the Cimbrians, and it's just by a whisker that Caepio and Maximus and a few soldiers escape themselves. And this is the worst defeat for the Romans since the Battle of Cannae with Hannibal. And again, the Cimbrians have cut down the main line of defense towards the heartlands of Rome. And again they choose not to push into Rome proper. So instead they push into Hispania. And for the first time they suffer defeat at the hands of a Celtic-Iberian alliance. They are repulsed. Now, after the Battle of Arausio, the Romans are fearful and in shock, and as the Republic itself is in danger. At Arausio, 10 to 12 legions were lost, and 120,000 soldiers, 80,000 well-trained, well-equipped soldiers were killed. So they recall Gaius Marius, who has fought the Jurgenthine Wars and is a very capable commander. He's recalled and brought in to lead the continuing campaign against the Cimbrians. And this is the turning point. Under him, they first defeat the Teutones, and then they defeat the main Cimbrian army at the Battle of Vercaelle, which I introduced this video with, reading Plutarch's description of the lead up to that battle. And it's an incredible description, and we know the Roman numbers are maybe a little bit exaggerated, but probably quite on spot. And so it must have been an immense battle. In Plutarch's description, the shield wall of the Cimbrians is 12 kilometers broad, and 15,000 cavalry. Again, these numbers might be inflated, but they must have had a substantial amount of numbers to be able to pose a threat to such a large Roman army. And now they'd been fighting, winning, for over a decade. So these were really capable warriors, probably much better equipped now after all the plunder they'd taken, and much better tactically, strategically. So quite imposing force. But Marius's Roman army, they fight hard, both sides. There are casualties on both sides, but eventually the Romans hold the victory. And the Cimbrian army is completely crushed, and they're either killed or taken into slavery. Tens of thousands of Cimbrians and Teutones were taken into slavery. Actually, Roman historians state that 30 years later, in the revolt of Spartacus, a large body of the revolting slaves were captives from this battle. Of course, they probably were quite young then when they were captured, but still, that's what the historians say. And also the women, like stated before, the women of the Cimbrians, they were also fighting warriors. So they held all the women and children were in set up the wagons of the wagon train up as fortifications behind the shield wall. So when the shield wall broke, the women engaged. And the Cimbrian shield wall didn't break easily because, as the Roman historians relate, they would take an iron chain and run it through the belts of the shield wall warriors. So they were connected by iron chain. So if cavalry did their piercing attacks, or they were pushed against, someone tried to break the shield wall, even if one of the soldiers died, they were still, so to say, chained together and could more easily hold the integrity of the shield wall. Anyway, when the Romans started routing the Cimbrian warriors, the woman would actually shoot down fleeing warriors on the Cimbrian side with their bows, and fight themselves with bows and spears. And according to the Roman sources, when they started seeing defeat in the eyes, the women started committing suicide and killing their children. There's one quite striking image where a Roman historian, I don't remember which, but he says that the Roman soldiers were shocked to see that one woman, she hung herself from one of the towers they built with the wagon, with her children tied by their necks to her feet. So they also, in her action, by hanging herself, she also hung her children from her own feet. So pretty intense last moments of the battle as well. King Boiorix was killed at this battle, and this marked the end of the 12-year Cimbrian campaign, or maybe a bit more but 12 years from the Battle of Noreia, which come very close. 2 times they could have pushed in and really threatened the Republic. So they came close. And the numbers of all these battles, which is what I find is very fascinating with this. Here in Scandinavia, we don't learn about this in school at all. Most people don't know anything about this. And what's crazy is that they must have been just as sophisticated in their fighting and tactics as the Vikings to put up with a fight like this with the Romans. And when from the description of their equipment, they weren't, like a lot of the illustrations of the Cimbrians, where they don't have any clothes on the upper body and only linen pants and bare feet and all this kind of strange stuff. Well, the Roman descriptions, they had magnificent white shields, iron armor, iron-plated armor on their upper bodies, and plumes of feathers on their helmets, and different also, animal ornaments on their heads. So, and they had cavalry, large numbers of cavalry. Even if the Roman numbers are exaggerated, they would still be very large forces of cavalry. So these actions with the Cimbrians make any battle almost in the Viking Age look like a little skirmish in comparison. Like the famous Battle of Stiklestad, where if you're really lenient with the numbers, you can maybe push it up to 15,000 all in all counted, both sides. But likely it was around 9 or 10,000. So it's quite incredible that these warlords are forgotten warlords. And then you have the tribe, the Teutones, which there's a little bit more controversy. But if you ask the people of Ty, they'll say the Teutones, they're from our area, which is north of Limfjord. And then, of course, you have other historians who say no, they're from further south. Again, I think there's some sense in placing them up in Ty. Of course, first, that then they actually are neighbors of the Cimbrians. And also, the old name for Ty is Teuta. If you look in old sources from about like 1500s going back, it's called Teuta Syssel. So Teuta to Teutone it doesn't seem so far away. And they are the neighbors of Himmerland, where you have these finds of that period, either through trade or plunder. You have large finds from this area, in the Roman area. Another curious fact with the Teutones is that their chieftain is given as a Teutobod. Now if you're from Thy here in Denmark, and you go to, then you would be called a Tybo. Bo means to live, and so people from Thy are called Tybo, like people from Vendel are called Vendelbo. So now when Thy was called Tyte later, now earlier in the old times, then they would be called Teutobo. And then we are getting quite close to the chieftain name of the tribe of Tyte. Teutobod is the tribe of Tyte, and he would be a Teutobo. So there's some curious etymological connections there. Again, this is my own conjecture. I just think it's interesting. When you have all these different sources, and you have the solid archaeological finds, which most historians, when you come into the visitor center here, it's the main plaque is about the Cimbrians and in Himmerland, and this was a fort connected to them, and all the archaeological findings. And then you have as a second layer of information, all these names that connect up. I think it's very interesting. It shows a kind of continuity that I think is quite often overlooked. We talk about the Viking expansion, and I've mentioned this before. But just driving around in the country in Denmark, I'm not Danish myself, but living here and driving around here is just, saturated with history. Everywhere you're just sitting here, I'm sitting in the fort, but I look there, I see a burial mound. I look there, I see 2 large burial mounds. I look over there, there's another burial mound. Just in my eyesight here, the area is saturated with history. And we know from written histories that, in danger of repeating myself, you just have to go a few hundred years back from the Viking era. You have the Anglo-Saxon expansion, which were the Anglen, the Jutes, and the Saxon, North Saxons, so West Danish and Frisian tribes, who took over England, basically, and split it among themselves under Hengist and Horsa, the 2 chieftains. They were first invited to deal with Picts, as I remember. I don't remember for sure. I wasn't going to talk about that today. But Fordigan, anyway, invites them over. And Hengist and Horsa, they're not too impressed by the British forces. So they go back and they get their English companions and their Jutish companions. And they gradually take over all of England. So this is just a few hundred years before the Viking Age, and the Vikings don't see them as different. These families are intertwined with their own families. So these are, their family blood relations. And then at the same time that in about 449, I think, Hengist and Horsa, they go over. But at the same time, you have the last part of the Gothic actions going on in South Europe, of large areas of Europe, which of course in this time of the Gothic expansion, you can't longer talk about it as from just the Gothic tribes. The alliances and all the things are completely intertwined. It's a pan-European power plays going on, of which the Gothic royalty is just one important, but not the whole picture at all, just a part of it. But they're kind of like a beginning pulse in 249, and then continuing for hundreds of years in the destruction of, or at least transformation of the Roman Empire. And they also come out of Jutland and southern Sweden. According to themselves, I know there's discussion of this, but according to themselves, they come out of this area and travel down the Vistula and these rivers in this area, Eastern Europe down to the Black Sea, expand into Europe that way. With starting quite famously with Kniva, when he crushes the Roman armies in 249 or 50. And then you go, before this, you have the Cimbrian Wars, which expand out from this area, I believe. I think Borremose, and there's another similar fort in this area, which has a similar archaeology. It's the same deal. And then you have expansion out here. And why would they expand out of Denmark is an interesting question. But I think one thing is that Denmark has relatively good in areas agricultural soil, but also is prone to wandering sand dunes, especially if you come from this area going north. If the agricultural use was too intensive and you have a dry period, you would have the sand from the coast blow in and just destroy agricultural areas. You still have a big sand dune that travels from the east coast. Now it's traveling, I don't remember which direction it travels from west to east as far as I remember. And anything in the path of that sand dune is, all that is destroyed. So that's one factor that could lead to acute overpopulation. And then you have, of course, the inundation. If you have a wet period, you could have sudden inundations. Or like in the 18th mid-century on the west coast here in Denmark, you had the Limfjorden was closed out to the west at that time. But then you had a sudden the ocean broke through the slim coastline there, and you get ocean in. And I don't know if at that time it had any bad consequences, but when the ocean rushed in, but it could potentially, things like that could potentially have bad consequences. So there are many things that could lead to overpopulation here. Yeah, that was the Cimbrians and the Cimbrian warfare. It's really a special place, and I've been here for hours now. There's nobody here. I haven't met a soul here. Nice weather. So it's not something people know about. And I just find it incredible, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's a rock when you come in here that I can find no information on, and it's engraved with the same figures as the Gundestrup Cauldron. So this is incredible for me. I didn't even know about this stone until I came out here. I tried Googling it now. You can find one image of it. But quite clearly it's very ancient. It's covered with lichen. I'll show you. It's covered with lichen. They grow generally at under 1 millimeter per year. And that would probably be the rate around here in this climate. Cold, harsh. A bit more if it's really favorable climate. So this whole thing is not covered with, this is one layer of lichen on top of another. These shields, they're about, I'd say, 50 centimeters. Here's my hand. 50 centimeters. They're all completely covered in lichen, this dog. And if anybody has seen the Gundestrup Cauldron, they'll recognize this motif. This is the same motif found in the Gundestrup Cauldron. And there's this rock isn't even mentioned in any of the information tablets here. But in order for lichen to cover this, they stretch 80 centimeters. They cover the whole rock. So say the rock is 1 meter 20 millimeter a year. That's 1200 years at least of lichen growth, unless they're growing from all directions. But anyway, clearly very ancient and nice carvings. I mean, this stuff puts the Yellingsten almost to shame. You tried googling this, you find one image. It's incredible. It's just casually here at the entrance to Borremose, not even mentioned in any of the plaques. And judging by the lichen growth, it's very, very old. Coupled with a motif, it's probably from the era of the Cimbrians. Yeah, so just wanted to share that. I thought that was quite incredible, and that there's basically no information on it. But it's the Gundestrup motif, or one of the motifs on the Gundestrup Cauldron. Same here. And the shields are the same that they've found in the wetlands in this area. Interesting. Anyway, that was that for now about the Cimbrian Wars. If you have any comments, anything, please write them. I always try to get back on the comments. Or if you enjoy the content, so please subscribe. And hope you join me for a video another time.